Morty comic issue 19. We start out with the Fly Police being minutes away from finding out where Rick's making the pemp juice, and they have an entire assault team. And they caught one of his dealers in an interrogation room, and I giggled a little at seeing that he's a Mr. Meeseeks. Those blue creatures Rick can summon to do whatever he wants in the show. At first I hated their annoying voice, but I end up liking them as an iconic creative part of the show. Morty asks Rick why he came back to the planet with the pemp juice, and Rick says that nobody ever looked at the first place they looked. But nobody knows where the pemp juice comes from, so how would it be the first place they looked? We see that Rick's relying on Mr. Meeseeks to deliver the pemp juice through a portal. The line he says when going through the portal makes me giggle because I know how silly and annoying his voice is in the actual show, and he's saying an adult thing. Also, this is the third time he's shown Morty this because he's so proud of himself for being able to do this when no other drug dealer could. At least in Breaking Bad, from what I've heard, he started out because one of his relatives was sick and there's no free healthcare in America. So at least that was a sympathetic and understandable reason to start, compared to Rick's lack of one. It was nice of the Meeseeks to warn the guy not to overdose, but it would have been actually helpful if he told him how much was too much. And because Mr. Meeseeks vanish after they complete their task, which they look forward to because they're in constant pain, it's untraceable. Morty naturally wonders about the danger of someone soft to Meeseeks. And Rick expects us to believe that the rest of the universe doesn't have prejudice against different colors. How is it untraceable though? Couldn't someone pretend to order the pemp juice as an undercover cop and then just go through the portal and find him? How has that not happened already? Morty has a sick burn when he told Rick that what he's doing here is a job. After a silence, Rick gets lazy and decides to stop, saying, I think he said, "Alright, pack up things, we're done here." And Morty's naturally annoyed because this was what caused him to stop, because he had to do it too much. And I guess he doesn't like the idea of it taking up potential free time. But he can do it as a hobby. But I guess because he's specifically delivering to people as fast as possible, it is a job because he's obligated to do it. Then we see Summer happily reunite an adorable baby pemp with its family. But why did it get separated? How they know it was separated and who to reunite it with? Their DNA matched? Jones isn't Rick. Oh good, there's an explanation. Summer reveals that the best thing they've done together is robbing all the space zoos so they could return the pemps to their home planet. Okay, how long had those pemps been in a zoo? They wouldn't be able to adjust to life in the wild again. Not if they were in the zoo for too much of their life, but I doubt that's the case. It turns out her favorite top had gotten ruined, and she had to put on clothes she finds weird again. And Jones wants this to keep happening. But how does he make sure this keeps happening without literally splashing her with mud and stuff in front of her, which she would notice was his fault, because she'd noticed that he was right behind her. What a series of coincidences. Jones compliments her appearance and scares her by putting his hands on her shoulders and saying that perhaps they can now make one more beautiful thing together. Well, at least he was able to say a genuinely romantic line instead of being completely creepy. He was at least able to wait until this point. But I really wish I knew a lot more about all the good things Summer did in her adventures to make this all worth it. She pushes him away and says that she thought they were friends. And he says that he doesn't want to be just friends, using his gender as an excuse. And says that this is why he was doing all those nice things for her. Good thing not every man is like this, even if some people might convince themselves that it is the case. She wants him to take her home and he threatens her. Why would he find it satisfying though? It's just especially confusing for him because I can assume most of his female companions were actually convinced to be with him, and it was willing. So he would only want that. She fortunately threatens him with being kicked, looking badass. Rick fortunately forgives Morty for talking him out of it, after he inexplicably apologized for making him stop doing something he hated Rick for doing. He really loves Rick. Rick also lampshades that it was a big waste of time, and not everything he does is going to be a big winner. So I guess that's the writer responding to feedback, and I wasn't the only one. I like this self-awareness. He complains that his portal gun ran out of power, and it does that a lot. And after he lampshades how inconvenient the timing is, he gets surrounded by police vehicles. It would have been better if he lampshaded the timing after this panel, but it's not bad writing because his portal gun has ran out of juice plenty of times before, and even said it was like a Game Gear. So it makes sense that it would happen at a bad time. But still, how is Morty smarter than Rick to this extent? It should have been obvious to a genius like Rick that people would figure out where the pimp juice was coming from based on analyzing it and learning what animal it was made from, and would come there. So he should have known to be working literally anywhere else. Rick reassures Morty to calm down, and summons a whole bunch of Mr. Meeseeks to help him and Morty escape. It's hilarious how they're so innocent seeming with their dialogue and mannerisms when they're being summoned to help a drug dealer escape. It made me giggle. This is why I remembered the story so fondly. It was also funny that the Fly Guy says, he has some sort of army, considering how they're talking. Morty trips and begs him not to leave him, and of course Rick helps him up, while lampshading his cliche bad luck there. Rick says they're lucky that the ship Summer took off in is right here for them to make a getaway. What a convenient coincidence. But again, it's not impossible. Coincidences happen in real life. The writing kind of lampshades Rick's dumb mistake with Summer earlier, though he doesn't call him out on it quite enough. Just as we see Summer being threatened with a gun, and she's stupid enough to not just interrupt him attacking him, not to mention she could have easily attacked him long before he pulled the gun out instead of them just talking. Rick shows up and finally uses the B gun from earlier. Good thing he had that with him. But you'd think he would have just used the real ray gun. Summer lampshades that she didn't need his help, being tough. And it was nice of Rick to acknowledge that she was right. She says that she was going to use a screwdriver she conveniently found against him. Seriously, why was that there? He's not Rick. And I guess he was allergic to bees. I guess this alien species has a biological reaction to pass out in response to being shot with bees. Or he was really scared and pulled an Antoine. This would have made more sense if Rick simply hit him with a ray gun. The only reason he wasn't written to kill him was the meta logic of, let's save him for later stories. But it was out of character for Rick to spare him, especially since this was his granddaughter. He killed the Jelly Bean King that tried to do the same thing to Morty. I guess now we know which grandchild is his favorite. Rick asks how her adventures were, but sadly we don't get an answer. We could get a lot of stories out of that answer, and she just says that she's over boys forever, and Rick makes me giggle with his response. Then he drops the pimp juice on Jones, and reveals that he's used to planting evidence to frame people. Well, Jones deserves it. And he plans to go to a fun game place called Flips and Chips from the show to spend all this money having fun with his grandkids. Well, that's sweet at least. Again, it's good that we're shown how he spends his money. And I love the nice coincidence that Jones works as a person to frame because he has 4 arms and a silly hat. And I don't think the writer needed to lampshade through dialogue that he should have investigated more, because by the looks of it, he shouldn't have. It looked so obvious that he was the one who was guilty. He wasn't being lazy, he was being a normal cop. And it turns out that he's been coincidentally put in the same cell as the Mr. Meeseeks they interrogated. And again, his dark dialogue is funny considering how silly and high-pitched his voice is and how nice he's being about it. So everything worked out for Rick and Morty in the end, as they're lucky enough to have Jones's spaceship as a way to escape the police, as it landed on this planet in particular with Summer, and Rick was stupid enough to return to the scene of the crime just to justify the police knowing where to go to find him. That was narratively convenient. It didn't have to be the one place where Rick would look the most stupid. But apparently it did, or else Jones would have had no reason to have landed his spaceship here to accidentally save them. It's not bad writing, they just got lucky, and that happens in real life too. If the only big problem with the story is that coincidences and luck happens, that's a pretty good story. It was also satisfying to see Jones get framed, because he would have gotten off scot-free otherwise. I guess Rick knew that going to prison was a crueler fate than simply killing him, so that does actually make sense. Convenient that he had his B-gun of all guns with him when he's not about sparing his enemies normally. The only real bit of bad writing here, aside from the fact that Summer was too stupid to interrupt Jones and attack him instantly instead of them talking a whole bunch. Aside from talking as a free action, we barely got to learn about Summer's heroism. And she somehow always got her clothes torn up in the adventures every time. I don't think that was necessary. I love the idea that the Mr. Meeseeks were used to deliver the pimp juice considering how they are, because it's such a funny contrast. That makes the story.